Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans. This is 2018 already. Oh my goodness. Level 1, and this is lesson 3. And I'm going to speak all about the specifics of DNA because all the time I speak about how the flying rainbow lasagna is a way to transform one's DNA and gain an additional degree of freedom. And that's like a lot of words. And at a certain point, this becomes more than a mere intellectual exercise, and it must be something that is experienced. But intellectual ideas affect our behavior of our DNA. So we're going to learn all about behavior of DNA in order to have a better foundation of learning. And I use, consensual science language that is what of the time and place of this here, so that we can talk about this. But I'm really not only believing in the science level of DNA, because there's something that's so much more that has to do with light and consciousness and all of the other connections to time that DNA gives us. But for right now, I'm just muting people, not because I don't love you, but because I don't want feedback on the recording. So this, in order for anyone who is new to all things lasagna, this shape is called the flying rainbow lasagna, and it can be considered a type of hyper torus or higher dimensional torus. This is the torus shape. It's actually two tori at 90-degree angles. If you look over my shoulder at any of these paintings, and you can check out more detailed images of my paintings if you go to my website, it's flyingrainbowlasagna.com, and it's with the lasagna with an E on the end. And then you can see all sorts of close-up images, and you'll see this four vortex shape, and the lobe shape that's inside of it is repeated over and over. And what I'm painting is a landscape of time, and your DNA relates to time because the movement of your DNA, and I'm just putting down my little things now so I can gesture, your DNA is constantly moving, all right? And I say this all the time, your DNA is not just a flat, static, X-shaped or Y-shaped chromosome that it's moving a lot of the time, but some of the time it is a chromosome and it is supercoiled. So we're going to talk about the process of supercoiling and the shapes that makes. And it's like, you don't have to memorize all this information, but being exposed to these ideas creates a change on your cellular level, that these are not just intellectual exercises. Like I said before, here's the boss coming on in right on cue. Come on up, girl. Come on up. All right, you want to come up? Good. Here's boss. Hi. We're going to do good work now. Okay. Yes, that learning new things transforms us on a genetic level. So really, when we came here as little infants and we didn't have all of these software programs running in our organized neurological centers yet, we had a different genetic dance. We had a different way that our genes were moving. And what we did, the very first thing that most people do, is download the human operating system, which is the human mind, which is not created by humans and not given to humans for their own convenience. It's given to humans for the convenience of the owner-operators of humans, who is not humanity. It's humanity's overlords. This is also why this is a tool for freedom. I've said many, many times, I will not explain in excruciating detail the difficulties or the limitations or the constraints of being here in this body, with this type of genetic behavior, without giving us the tool for freedom. And we can endlessly examine the bars on the cage. And that would be like saying, looking at all the ways in which either the human body or human society or human consciousness is limited or malfunctioning or malformed or distorted in this time and place. There's a lot that we can look at. We could spend endless hours talking about it, but I find it much more effective and empowering and much less depressing to speak about solutions. And the solution is, for me, flying rainbow lasagna. This is the tool and the invention and the creation that I've come up with in order to transcend these limitations and in order to just be in this body as Aurora. So Aurora is the end result of the combination of the stellar information, the stellar network, the consciousness of the stars, and a physical Earth-based body. That's just like the Aurora Borealis, that is the end result on this planet of solar wind or high energy particles that come from the sun and Earth's magnetosphere. And coincidentally enough, Earth's magnetosphere is shaped like a torus, like this little yellow thing that I'm always holding up. This is Earth's magnetosphere, and it creates a wonderful protective envelope around our planet so that everybody doesn't get fried by the extremely high energy particles of consciousness that come from the sun. So it's like saying, if you expose yourself directly to that high level of consciousness, high, like la la la, very high, then it can blow your mind. Just like that David Bowie song, he'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks he'd blow our mind. That what we need to do is have it mitigated so that it's at a level that's palatable, that we can actually eat. And so that is the whole idea of, my persona as Aurora, that I am a stellar network inhabitant, traveler person that is at that level, and that what I'm also doing is vibrating the DNA of this body using this flying rainbow lasagna shape in order to occupy and send energy through the physical container. And so that allows me to be here. And I have a persona, a sense of self. I wear a dress. I live in a house. I have a little dog. Like, these are all the things that people in this time and place do. And I follow all of the rules of this time and place. But I also do a lot of things that bend the rules. This is not breaking the rules, it's bending the rules. And what this allows to happen, so after we do this genetic transformation, what it means is that your inside and your outside become communicative as opposed to discrete. Like so I was talking about the baby's journey, and this mostly happens, in infancy when little people first come here. Come here, download the human operating system, then you start to download the virus known as language. You start to learn your name and the name for things like cup or, fork or, yum yums or whatever. You learn the basic things, and you have to, because you have to find some way to communicate, like, I'm hungry, or my diaper is poopy, or whatever you need as a little tiny infant. You have to download these systems, even though these systems have, I would say, an inhibitory effect on the free dance of our DNA. It limits and constrains how our DNA can function. And once you download this operating system, you start to get information from the other humans that are already constrained. And they will tell you, this is what disease is. This is what aging is. This is what death is. And almost everybody has the experience at some point in their early childhood or in their infancy of seeing an old person, and someone has to explain to you, that person's skin looks wrinkly and different than yours because they're old. Or you see someone, you have experienced death of a family member or death of a beloved pet or a goldfish or whatever. And it's like, where does the goldfish? The goldfish is bye-bye. You have to learn about death, because that's not, and I'm trying to tell everyone, death is an aberration, a thing that is not supposed to exist. So in level 2, we're going to get into how to transcend the limitations of duality. So in level 1, we're just going to talk about this as like an athletic achievement of one's DNA, and we're going to get into the actual structure of DNA and how that turns into this. So one of the big ideas is epigenetics, the idea that ideas transform the behavior of genes, and genes have behavior. They're not just things that sit there. Your DNA doesn't just sit there, it actually does stuff. And the reason why it has to do stuff is because when it is tightly supercoiled, it's like a scroll. Imagine a like old-fashioned papyrus scroll that is all rolled up, and you cannot read what's inside of the scroll. And there are these little RNA messengers. Let's get some pictures, because pictures worth a million of my flapping, moving mouth parts. Yes, and I have all of my photos extensively organized, so I'm ready for this. We'll get all of my wonderful DNA pictures. This picture, and wait, now I'm squinting and scrolling too. I do squinty faces. This picture, and then we do one more. Where's another good one? I don't know, now I can't find it. I know it's over here somewhere. Okay, how about this one? Good. All right, so this is an actual, let's say it's a composite picture of DNA that has been perceived through an electron scanning microphone, and then had additional, human animation and augmentation put on top of it. It's not exactly a snapshot, but it's a really relatively accurate picture of DNA. And what we've got are just these individual strands. So, okay, here's like one strand that's like one piece of yarn, and a piece of yarn is made out of many, many little short pieces of wool that have been woven together. So we've got that one bundle that we would call one DNA strand. And if you take that DNA strand and you start to supercoil it, wait, okay, now I want to move forward on this. Okay, wait, first I should do RNA messengers. I don't have a picture of that here. Oh, yes, I do. This green guy right here, that I'm highlighting in the giant blue dot, that is an RNA messenger. So the whole idea is that when the scrolls are tightly coiled up, the little green RNA messenger cannot access the words, quote unquote, that are written in the scrolls. And the way that it accesses it is by kind of going around and around, like almost running on like a little train track, and being able to read the different bumps in the grooves. And it's just like music, because there's a major and a minor groove. I'm making now like a blue line over here that's a major groove, and then the little tiny one is the minor groove. It's just, I think that's a really interesting allusion to the world of music, because I say all the time that these are like vibrating strings. This is like a vibrating guitar string or a vibrating piano string. So let's get to supercoiling. I mean, This is a picture of supercoiled DNA. And in order to unroll the scrolls for the RNA messengers to actually access the information that's in there, what has to happen is there have to be snips. Like this is I'm making an enzymatic snip with these blue lines, snip, snip, and that relieves the tension. Like the DNA is coiled so tightly that the RNA messengers can't get in there and read it, so they have to go snip, snip, so they can then unfurl it. So this is not just, here we go back to my face. It's not just simple genetic behavior. It's incredibly complex, all the different things that your DNA can do. It can, move and twist and morph itself. It can also cut itself. It can cut itself into snippets and open up some portions of itself, and it can keep some portions of itself closed or methylated. That's what that other picture was. So this is the end. And let me draw more pictures. Okay, this is what I've just described. That is during the portion of a cell's life. Here's this outer cell membrane. Here's the nuclear membrane. And this area where we're making a lot of curly cues, that would be considered DNA that is unfurled and is in the form of chromatin. And I've spoken about that a lot. Chromatin. That's like we've taken the sweater of your DNA, pulled all of the threads out so that it's just a giant vibrating ball of yarn. And that vibrating ball of yarn can have all sorts of interesting behavior. And I say all the time, like, hey, that's what your DNA is doing most of the time. It is dancing and twisting and vibrating. That is absolutely accurate. At a certain portion of the DNA's life, what it needs to do is coil itself up so it starts to organize itself and get coiled and coiled and coiled and coiled and coiled, and eventually it turns into the X-shaped chromosomes. And that is in preparation for mitosis, or the cell splitting, cell division. So I'm making like a big, that's like, a line, a serration, that's like a knife is cutting the cell in half. And that's analogous to before you're going to go on an airplane and you have to pack all your clothes into your suitcase. And in order to get everything in there, you have to roll everything up until it's tiny, tiny, most compact it possibly can be. And that way you can fit all of your socks and all of your jeans and everything that has to go into your actual suitcase in the suitcase. And at a certain point, what happens when you have coiled up your DNA is that the nuclear membrane kind of dissolves. And now I'm just going to take a different color, and I'm just going to say, like, this membrane here, that's the nuclear membrane, it kind of dissolves. It's not there anymore. And that allows these, there's many X-shaped chromosomes that are in there. It allows them to split apart and then form their new cells. Like, you're going to have a copy of this. And the whole reason why I bring this up is because that is analogous to a human. I'll draw like a little stick figure person, has to get into their, let's draw with a different color, their spacesuit. Here's like, I'm drawing a little spacesuit around this guy, because you have to, if you're going to, fly through space without your spaceship, have a protective coating around you. So flying through space without your spaceship would be analogous to losing the nuclear membrane during the process of mitosis. This process of mitosis is a leap of consciousness. And I'm also going to talk about the leap of energy from one shell of the electron to the next shell of the electron. The point is that if the DNA wasn't coiled tightly into these chromosome shapes, then it could not successfully make this journey from one level of consciousness to the next level of consciousness. It needs to have like a little space suit around it. The chromosome shape is like the space suit that is around it. Just like Earth has a protective magnetic envelope that protects Earth from being fried by too much energy, too much intelligence, too much information coming to it. It has that protective envelope, and the entire solar system has the heliosphere as the protective envelope. I spoke about this last week for people who are in the class consistently. So too do the chromosomes. This representative of self and possibilities need to have a protected format so that it can do this transformation. And this transformation is analogous to what happens like when caterpillar turns into butterfly. So the vibrating strings of your chromatin, for a little while, they stop vibrating in that fashion. They get super coiled, tightly coiled. They coil up like chromosomes, and then they are ready to have the nuclear membrane dissolve. This is like we're ready for transportation. We're all packed up in the suitcase type of shape. And then, when they make their, changing colors here, when they, you've got them all lined up, and then here's the other one, we're getting a little messy there. And then you slice it all open with a knife, and then you draw new cell membranes here. In red, I'll be drawing, here's the new nuclear membrane, here's the new cell membrane, here's the new nuclear membrane, here's the new cell membrane. So then they get nice, you put them in a nice safe place again, and then they can unfurl again, and they can take off their spacesuits, and then they don't have to be worried about living, you know, with nothingness around it. So that is why DNA has it necessitates, it must have that capacity to be supercoiled in that way so that it can make that level of journey, it can make that leap of consciousness. Here, okay, I should clear everything out. Let's talk about another, well, just us as an aside, let's talk about another leap of consciousness, and that is the leap of electrons. If this is the nucleus of an electron, and then here's the first electron, sorry, let me start again because I used the wrong word. This is the nucleus of an atom. This is the first shell of possible electrons positioning in an atom, and here's the next electron shell. So these places where I'm making wavy lines, these exist as areas of possibility. These are shells. So I'm drawing it in cross section here, but these are places where electrons can live. But electrons are also beings of pure possibility and probability. Hey, exactly like what I talk about with this shape here of your life being an area represented by various probabilities and possibilities. So this little pink electron can be technically any place in this whole shell. It's like saying we don't know exactly where it is, but there's a high probability that it is somewhere in this shell, but we can't say exactly where it is. And in order for that little pink electron to get to this area that I'm now highlighting with the big giant pink squiggle, it has to make what humans call the quantum leap, and that's going from this level here directly up to this level here. And there's no way to do it incrementally. There's no way to do it like, okay, I'm starting off here, then I'm going to make a little baby step here, then a little baby step here, then a little baby step here, and then finally end up at my destination over here. That is not how it is allowed to do. What electrons are allowed to do is hang out here in this electron shell, be in themselves, and gathering more and more and more energy. And I'm making it like bigger and bigger and bigger as it gets more energy. That's just as a graphic representation of it. And then when that little pink dot has gathered together enough energy, it has to have lots of excitation, has to be very, very excited. Then it is ready to make that leap all in one leap. That's what quantum means. It has to jump all in one jump. And it jumps from that layer of pink that I was just highlighting to this layer that I'm now highlighting in green. And that is a transformation of consciousness. So we're talking about all of these things that are transformations of consciousness from one level to the next, and there's no way to do it incrementally. And that is what we are experiencing with flying rainbow lasagna. And when I say no way to do it incrementally, like I don't mean you don't get to practice, but I'm trying to say that it's like you gather your energy, you practice, 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 and then you run the marathon, or practice your instrument and then you play the symphony. So again, I use this analogy all the time that I'm just getting a drink of water too. Your body is your instrument, and your vibrating DNA is like the vibrating strings of your instrument. And that when you get new ideas, that is how you tune your instrument so you can play it better. And tuning your instrument means that instead of these energy centers being askew, these energy centers become perfectly aligned. So a lot of the time, these energy centers are wibbling, wobbling all over the place. And what that means is, let's talk about the needle of awareness. So I do the time field all the time. Get to the whiteboard. The lower quadrant of that yellow sculpture right over here, it's very fragile, I don't want to hold it that much, is shaped like this. Time field. And of course, that is a flat cross section of something that we know is actually vortex shaped like this, but I'm just drawing it very simply. And I'm drawing these lines of energy starting out down here and moving upward like that. But we understand that they are long coils. You guys are already experts at this. This is a set of possibilities. Oh, thank you very much. It's good to see you too, Patricia. I'm just making sure everybody is muted. Just tell me if there's any background noise. Possibilities and probabilities, that all of these, so let's draw one timeline, the green timeline. This is the one timeline that exits that level of reality. Let's say that everything that I'm highlighting in light blue is analogous to, here I'm drawing that atom again. There's the atom's nucleus, and that's that first shell, and there's that second shell. That everything that I just highlighted here is analogous to this first shell, this first level of awareness. And that everything that we're experiencing here, I've spoken about that at length, how we, get, oops, where'd my thing go? This, this. How we start off here out at the outer periphery, and then we have to experience the membrane of death and go back to the beginning and then start again and again and again and again. I know I'm using like verbal shorthand here, but you understand, we fill up this whole entire area here. We fill up this whole entire area with experienced timelines, even though we're not supposed to. What we're supposed to do is be able to only travel up this wonderful central core timeline. And that central core timeline is a series of events, and it's also a series of characteristics. This whole entire structure that we're doing here is a refinery of consciousness. And that means that we are refining characteristics, or we're like a lens focusing light from the general to the specific. And all of this stuff that's over here on the periphery is not the true you. And it's not the true you in terms of experienced events or evidenced personality characteristics. So there are some versions of you out here that aren't the true you because, you know, you had horrible diseases and you died, or had all of your arms and legs amputated, or whatever. It meant that you couldn't be your true self because you didn't have the equipment. And then there are, you know, areas that on the periphery that are also psychopathic, where your mind and your emotions are so distorted that you become an axe murderer and that you're not your true self at all. And that this whole experience, this whole journey of learning to go from the idea of being askew on the side, like I'm holding this sculpture over to the side like this, so you know what I'm talking about, and also being oriented like that, going to the side and hitting the membrane of death, is not what's intended. And what we're trying to do with all of our life experiences is to right ourselves, to go from being askew to being aligned and being able to return to this state of infinity. And when we return to that state of infinity, I want to tell everyone, it is not death. That is not equated with death. Death is when you hit this membrane here. Let's choose a different color. Here we go. Death is when you hit this red membrane here. That is a boundary of this whole entire system that we're inside of. That is death. And I'll also talk about, you know, when you die, you're supposed to go into a state of pure entropy. You're not supposed to hang around, you know, quote unquote, in afterlife, maintaining your consciousness. What we're supposed to do is have consciousness up here at the 0th dimension at infinity. And we're supposed to come into the material world and manifest. And then we're supposed to maintain our connection the whole time that we are reconnecting, or let's say traveling back up in this direction to the source, which is also our destination. We're never supposed to be cut off. We were never intended to be cut off from that source of, you could call it intelligence, or an organizing principle, the great conductor that teaches us how to play music written by the great composer. So all of these blue lines over here, that's like music that has been written. Those are possibilities and they exist. And they are also probabilities. So if I turn this sculpture, I've done this before in class, if I turn the sculpture on its side, then you see that this is shaped just like a bullseye. And now my white pen is going down the center, and it is going down the center of the bullseye like an arrow hitting the center of the target. So now let's draw, here's a bullseye. And here's the center, oh, sorry, I'm using the wrong words. You can tell my brain is moving too fast. Here is a bullseye target. Here's the center of the target that we're all aiming for, like with that white arrow of my white pen. And in terms of probability, probability means what is the likelihood of something happening? So now I am highlighting in blue this whole area. There is a very, very great likelihood if we shoot an arrow, just shoot an arrow, it's going to hit someplace blue. Look, that arrow hit someplace blue, that arrow hit someplace blue. Very great likelihood. Thousands and thousands of timelines exist in that area, in that bundle of timelines. But only one little timeline hits that central core, gets out of this level of excitation, that's this level of excitation here in the atom, in order to make the quantum leap to get up to the next level of consciousness. And that leap is what happens when we exit the wormhole here. There's where I'm making that black squiggly line. There's a little wormhole, a little opening in the membrane of death. And that opening is also analogous to the point that is the convergence point at the center of this yellow sculpture. That is what we are all aiming for in terms of our refinery of consciousness heading up in that direction. We all want to maintain our connection while we're in the physical flesh, and then as we go exploring these experiences on the central core timeline, we eventually exit this level of reality, but that's not the end of the journey. That's the whole point. And this also speaks to what is ascension versus death. Because I think I was saying in the Facebook introduction. And Terence McKenna has really good writing and speeches on this. The expectation of the personal eschaton and the planetary eschaton. And, well, I should write what eschaton is. This is end of world. And the eschaton is the sense that you are implanted, you know, as a tiny child, and then later on in life reinforced with the idea of your personal death, your personal end. That goldfish died, goldfish is bye-bye, and one day you will go bye-bye too, right? That's a pretty heavy thing. Or, you know, you go to grandma's funeral and it's like, where's grandma? Grandma is dead, and then one day you'll die too. Just as a very brief aside, I don't want to go on too many tangents, but I used to be a professional babysitter, and I babysat for some really smart, like very tuned in children over in Woodstock. And there's one little guy, I told him all about, you know, the sun expanding, and was going to expand at a certain point, you know, and encompass where Earth is presently orbiting. And like most little kids, when they go to sleep at night and they can't sleep, it's like the boogeyman or whatever. They get up, they're like, I'm afraid of the boogeyman. He got up, he couldn't sleep at night. He's like, Aurora, I'm afraid that the Earth is, that the sun is going to expand and, oh, my dog is barking, and overwhelm the Earth and, you know, burn Earth up. And I was like, there, dear, it's okay. That won't happen. That won't happen for several more billion years. You know, you've got billions of years before that happens. But that is the idea that, oh, sorry guys, just we have people walking by on the sidewalk, and that's when my dog is barking. Okay. Ooh, quiet down, quiet down. Okay, good opportunity for me to check out the chat. Patricia says, oh, quiet down. Cheeky, you gotta quiet down if you're gonna be in here, okay? Patricia, come on, we can't have this. No. Patricia says, in one of your lessons, you mentioned that we have to move through the outliers of refinement. Oh, I'm so sorry, Cheeky. You need to go and sit in a different spot if you're gonna bark. Here. Joelle says, Cheeky has a lot to say. She does have a lot to say, but she has to say it quietly while we're doing this on camera. Okay. Patricia says, in one of your lessons, you mentioned that we have to move through the outliers of refinement to get to the infinity timeline. But isn't that giving energy to the beings that are stealing from us? Do we have to go through all that, or can we refine and go to the infinity? I am telling everyone that you do not have to experience all of the periphery before you finally get to that central core timeline. That is an erroneous notion, and I hope that I'm really, really clear on this. Up until this point, before we invented flying rainbow lasagna, that was what life was. We had to endlessly circulate all around and around and around and around and around and fulfill every single possibility before we finally got to that last possibility that leads us out of this level of existence and into the next expanded level of existence. Now we have a new option. You were never intended to have to experience all of those peripheral possibilities before you finally get that one possibility that is about your true self being a divine being, and you being an empowered experiencer of time, as opposed to a person who is just fated, destined to die or suffer or experience diseases or any of those things. That I have so many things that I want to say, blah, 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 blah. When we do that leap, when we get through that wormhole, thank you for such an excellent question too. When we get through that wormhole over here, we have an amazing inner experience. And that inner experience is the realization that I am God. That is what we are all heading for. Like this dot over here, that zeroth dimension, that infinity and the timeline that comes from it, that is us being a divine being. That is us being God. That we recognize we are the source of consciousness, having emanated ourselves into this world, having the experience of being in this world. Like, you are the great composer that wrote all of this amazing, beautiful music. And you are the great conductor that said, tap, 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 now it is time to be born. And you are also the musician playing the music that you wrote in a different form as the great composer. And that's why I make that distinction. Sometimes when I say to people, like, I didn't invent this language, I perceive it and I write it, and I share it with other people. Like, I, as Aurora, I'm the embodied musician. I have a body, I have an instrument, and I'm here playing the music. So the embodied Aurora did not invent this music. But if I dilate my identity to Aurora not embodied, Aurora expanded, Aurora at the level of the stars and beyond, then I would say, yeah, that me created all of this music. But that me, that is not only limited to the ego presence known as Aurora, is also you. It's that central convergence point is all of us. That's the big thing, the big takeaway. Like last week in level 2, when I spoke about the singularity being in all of us, just drinking. That singularity is literally the 0th dimension and the infinity and the presence of everything and the presence of all consciousness, and it's in all of us, and we are all it. So in a lot of ways, this journey of transformation that we're undergoing is a transformation of our sense of identity, what you identify with as self, as me. So that's also part of that program that we received as tiny little children. You're like, you and everything that's inside of your epidermis are different and separate and discrete from the rest of the world. Your name is Johnny or Susie or Aurora, and you're different from the rest of the world. That's those guys over there, and you're you. And that's a necessary level of development, but it's not the end of the level of development, because when you really get into higher levels of perception, what you start to see is you're much more than just you. You are not connected only to your own mind. You're connected to many other minds, and not just minds in this time and place, but minds in other times and places. So your sense of boundary, your sense of self dissolves and becomes more porous. Like I was saying last week about the idea of microbes. Microbes are out here in the air. Microbes line the inside of your mouth and your alimentary tract and go all the way out through your other end, that you're literally covered in microbes, and the microbes are inside of your tummy and they help you to be able to digest your food. You're part of your environment. There's no way for you to be discrete from your environment. And when we really understand that and you really embody that, then you see these psychotic levels of self-destruction that are evident in some people who do not identify with not only their body, but the microbes that they're a part of, the atmosphere of oceanic atmosphere that we're a part of, the planet that we are a part of. And like I speak a lot also about those pesky occupiers of the interstices as being consciousness invaders to this planet. That is the thought structure of an invader. That is not the thought structure of a native of this place. If you are a native of this place, you're like, you know something? I'm here as part of this place, and I'm a part of that butterfly that's flying by, and I'm a part of that crocodile that's swimming over there, and I'm a part of the rain that is falling. It is much more, I guess, in this world, what would be described as an indigenous cultural perspective, as opposed to an industrialized cultural perspective. But I don't want anyone to think like, oh, well, we're using iPads and we're industrialized and therefore we must be separate from nature. No. It's time for all of us to claim our true heritage of being natural beings on this planet. That's the whole gig. That's the whole thing. So I'm here as Aurora, right? It took a long time for me to be physically integrated energetically, like with this physical body. It took a long time, like the way that a hand goes into a glove. It took many, many years, because I had a lot of neurological damage, for me to be really in this body. And that's the challenge. So flying rainbow lasagna was definitely a healing tool that allowed me to jump up and over any neurological blockages. So I think sometimes you guys can see on camera that my face is a little bit asymmetrical, that this eye goes down a little bit and this eyebrow doesn't necessarily go up as high as the other one was, but it used to be much more droopy. Like if you look at old videos that I did many years ago, I had a much more highly asymmetrical face. And that's because I had a lot of neurological damage that I wasn't able to effectively use the muscles on that side of my face and on that side of my body. And it took a long time for me to be able to find pathways, new pathways. And I learned this is neuroplasticity, but I didn't used to have that word. I made new wiring to be able to, in a magical way, get energy to the places where it needed to go in my body, and not just my physical eyebrows, but also, internally in the metabolism of my neurology. So all of that in order to say, thank you, Joelle. Thank you for saying that you didn't even notice. I know it's why I hesitate to point it out, because I've also, I've done a lot of work. I've had a lot of healings with Reiki healers. Not that I went every week, but I would have these people come into my life at just the right time, drinking water, to be able to help put me together more as a puzzle piece, like fractures coming together and then being able to be healed. So it's been an amazing journey, and I I really appreciate the healing work that others have helped me to be able to do. And all of that in order to say that, oh, so Joe, okay, good question. All right. And I'm not going to forget. Okay, wait. Okay. Joelle says, do you recommend Reiki? I've heard good and bad things, but probably depends on the practitioner. Absolutely depends on the practitioner. The whole idea is that Reiki has an energetic firewall programmed into it, that energy is it's intelligent energy, and it goes to where it needs to go, and it cannot be hijacked or distorted. However, I have heard stories of people that had negative experiences with Reiki and everything like that. So I would say, like with anything, like choosing any kind of therapist, massage therapist, anything, like choose someone that you really trust and whose energy you feel integrates well with your energy. And yeah, I'm very cautious about anybody, putting their hands on my body, putting their energy into my body, saying that they're going to fix or improve me in any way. I've always been highly skeptical and reserved in not wanting other people to inappropriately mess with my programming. So I'm always much more about self-programming, self-healing. But I also recognize at a certain point, like, doctors can't necessarily operate on their own hearts. Like, you sometimes need someone else to help you out in order to transcend some of these difficulties. So yeah, I did lots of inner healing work, and also had a lot of help with what I could only describe as benevolent, non-terrestrial, non-embodied beings that have also helped to. So all of this in order to say that it took a lot for me to become integrated into the cellular structure of this body. And the more that I've become integrated, the more that I appreciate the sophistication of this body. And I no longer see it as anything separate from me. And I actually had to be reminded that a lot of people in this time and place see their body as something separate, like some disposable Kleenex, like, oh, I'm in my body for right now, but then I'm going to get rid of it and then I'll get a new body. That's part of that escapism that I think I mentioned in the intro, the escapism, like, oh, we're just going to get rid of the planet, like a disposable planet. We'll get a new planet, or we'll fly off in a clank metal spaceship. We'll fly to a new planet, fly to a new place. We'll get out of here. That's that whole idea. Like, you're going to die. The eschaton means good. We're circling back to the original intention of this. The eschaton means that you have a personal death, like you die and your body drops and then your consciousness flies elsewhere. And many people think like that's how you get free, because I understand this is a very heavily embattled, constrained reality. And then the other idea is that how do you keeping your body, getting rid of your body. I'm trying to say, you transform your body. You don't have to get rid of your body. Okay, so I'm sorry I'm jumping around so much. My brain is moving really, really fast. I'm finding it hard to put it into words. Sometimes I've expressed this opinion to people, and one person pitied me. She's like, oh, poor Aurora, you actually want to stay on this horribly polluted, effed up world. And because they don't see that the body of the world, of the planet that we're on right now, is a beautiful, beautiful place that's just been horribly, horribly distorted and polluted. And that this place can be magical. It can be absolutely comfortable and enjoyable and joyous to be here. What people would describe as heaven can be this place. And I don't mean like the Christian heaven of flying on wings, like, bird wings or floating in clouds. Those are very beautiful, poetic images, but that can be used in a very destructive, unhealthy way. If you think about it like that, you can't apply that literally to the planet. But all of the things that we have here can be incredibly beautiful and perfect, but what we're experiencing is a distortion of our DNA that limits our capacity to be conscious and to perceive and to intentionally control and add to our journey as we're moving through the music of time. And that makes this a hellish realm. That makes this a very uncomfortable realm where people experience their own suffering and struggling and disease and eventual entropy and death. And so the whole idea of the eschaton is your personal death and your personal end of your life, and then you transform or transcend into something else. And that we have this religious writing in the end of the Bible, this book of Revelations, that has had a magnificent impact on human thought, on human expectation of what is going to happen. Even if you're not a religious person, because those biblical ideals and expectations are put into all sorts of pop culture, all sorts of movies and television and superhero shows that are all about the end of the world and how that's going to happen. So for a lot of, and I'll get to all of your wonderful comments, the question of how you as an individual transcend death, it's writing a new story. So I'm trying to say with all this, we've been given this narrative that is a fiction that everybody believes in, the fiction of accelerated decrepitude through time and death, and the necessity of the end of it all. And a lot of people think it's a positive thing, like so-and-so died and now they're free. And it's like not necessarily true, because if you're looking at my time diagram, you're circulating around and around and around. That's not necessarily how you get free. How you get free is by being like that electron that makes the jump, by getting super, super, super excited from one electron shell to the next electron shell, from one level of consciousness to the next level of consciousness. It's like going from being a caterpillar to a butterfly. So a butterfly looks really different than a caterpillar, even though it might share some commonalities in its coloring or some of its, but most of its structures get dissolved in the transformation process. In exactly the same way, what we will become after we have this idea, I am God, that's a transformative idea. Just like as little infants, we were transformed on a genetic level by the concept of death. Your goldfish went bye-bye. Now your genes are different because you just learned about death. Same thing when you have that realization, I am God. That moment of connection, I'm putting down my little sculpture here, that moment of connection when you reach that place, that's like, I call all of these last moments of time, and I'm going super fast here, I know. Those last moments of time that are on the membrane of death. Membrane of death, these are all these last moments of time. Those are your final denouements, the final frozen snapshots of the movie of your life. And when you take this central core timeline that never ends and keeps on going infinitely upward in that direction, your realization that you have right here, instead of a final denouement where you're frozen in entropy on the membrane of death, what happens is you have the realization right here, I am God. And then you don't stop. You keep going. You transform. This is a marathon. You don't stop in your journey through time or through consciousness experiencing time. But what you do is make that leap from one level of excitation to the next level of excitation. And that means that you are now transformed and having a new experience. So it also means, like, if people only know you by your caterpillar face and then you transform into a butterfly, they might be like, where's the caterpillar that I knew and loved? I miss that furry little guy so much. But it's like, that furry little guy turned into me. I'm not gone. I'm just transformed. I'm different. So now let me get to all of these wonderful comments. Okay, so wait. I missed this one right here. Pedro had asked, do we start in this world from the flat bottom of the cone? What about the rest of the cycle from the upper part of the convergence point? So up until this point, what we have done is we have started from the flat part of the bottom over here. I'll just do it in black. We, up until this point, have started at the periphery down here and then cycled inward, inward, inward. So if we're looking at it from the top down, this is like an old-fashioned record where, like a record of music, like from the 1970s. We started the needle of the record over here, and the needle of the record travels through this whole big, long groove. Remember, everyone, the major and the minor groove, until it finally hits the center. And this needle over here, it is the needle of awareness. I'm always pointing to this place in the center of my head. Let me get a picture for you. It is your attention. And you guys are now becoming experts in this class, and I know that I'm moderately repetitive. Your attention, this comes from attenuous for Greek. Here we go. And this means this is the aspect of your energetic anatomy. Let's get a color here. This guy. This is your aspect of energetic anatomy it emanates from your pineal gland, but it is not synonymous with your pineal gland. And it is your tendril of attention. Your tendril of attention that reaches out like an elephant's trunk, and whatever it touches upon is what you are paying attention to. And this profound realization is how we can understand that you're not just swimming around your own private kiddie pool of thoughts and perception, that wherever you send your tendril of attention, you are touching on something. So to give an example, let's say this is a flower over here, a little flower that has grown out of the ground. If I want to learn about flower, I can touch this with my tendril of attention. And then what I've created is an energetic bridge between these two things that exist, that are both God, they're both divine, and this is God learning about God's self directly. And this is how I've learned about everything that I'm teaching you here. I use the tendril of my attention to reach out and touch on whatever I wanted to know about. If I wanted to know about time, if I wanted to know about the sun, if I wanted to know about chloroplasts, if I wanted to know about DNA, I reached out and I touched it with my tendril of attention. And this is an intimate act. This is not just like, it's something that you should do like with permission, with friendship, in a positive, good way. And this is also why we begin to understand the idea of dark magic, or magic this is a type of magic. I can touch my mind to your mind using my tendril of attention. But I'm a good person. So what I do, instead of barging into someone else's mind, I'm like, knock, knock, knock. I'd like to touch you with the tendril of my attention. Is it a good time? Am I allowed to do this? And if the person's like, no, get out, then I'm like, okay, passing by, I won't do that. And that's called interdimensional ethics. And the idea is you're never supposed to be like, I am now stabbing you with my tendril of attention. I'm forcing my way into your mind. That is mind rape. And that happens all the time around here with synthetic telepathy, as I've spoken about. Fake boobs, people who don't have real assets, they have implanted, technologically augmented assets, and they have no qualms whatsoever about using their assets unethically. And that's the whole point. You're supposed to earn your assets, and as you go through this transformative process of earning your assets, you get ethics, you get values. Just like when you're a little kid, you have to learn how to control your body so you're not flailing all over the place, and then you also have to learn how to be polite. Like, oh, you have to knock before you go inside of someone's house. My little dog is super funny too. We walk around the neighborhood and she wants to go right up to someone's front door and just barge in because she likes the way their breakfast smells. I'm like, no, 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 we're not allowed to go anyplace. We need an invitation. And that's called social structure, and that's appropriate. So there is social structure at the level of telepathy. And I'm also just checking my time to make sure. And I know I'm speaking really, really fast. I have about 10 more minutes in order to continue with this. That's exactly right. Joelle says, attention is like making love. Literally, it is like making love. And now we can also understand how it is non-consensual, like rape, if we have something like advertising or the media or some other thing that is requiring your attention against your will. And I've experienced this where I don't really watch TV, and I definitely don't watch reality TV, but sometimes I have had thoughts come into my mind that are about blah, blah reality star with a huge ass. And I'm like, why do I have that coming into my mind? I never think about blah, blah person with a huge ass. But that is one of these synthetic broadcasts that's out there that is being like, I want to come into your mind. I'm a burglar. I'm an invader. I'm coming in whether you like it or not. I don't care if your door is locked. I'm coming in. And so that's totally inappropriate. It's totally not okay. So yeah, what we have to do is protect ourselves with things like the Merkaba and other shields of protection that keep out unwanted visitors and only allow in super cool guests. And that's also part of being in this level of the time field, at this level of excitation of the electron shell. We are right now experiencing those pesky occupiers of the interstices that are attempting to hijack your attention. And so this is the whole deal. Like, your attention should go where you want it to go. And especially in lovemaking, like especially in physical, intimate partnership of procreation, your attention should be focused on your partner. You shouldn't be fantasizing about Marilyn Monroe or some other sex symbol. Whatever you are thinking about, you are connecting to that being. And this is why it is actually harmful. This is one of the reasons why pornography is harmful, because even if the participants that were filmed are doing so consensually, when you are thinking about their lovemaking or their sexual activity while you're doing your sexual activity, that means that you're putting your tendril of attention on those guys over there instead of on this over here. So yeah, and this relates to every single thing that we do. It relates to food. When I'm eating my food, I put my tendril of attention on my food, so that is going into me. What is not the right thing to do is to be like, okay, my mouth is chewing up my Doritos corn chips while my attention is placed on my TV or on some other form of entertainment. That means that I'm not paying attention at all to the food that's coming inside of me. Now I circle back to the concept of being fully invested in one's body. I had to learn that a lot of people are not fully invested in their bodies. So I worked really hard to get fully into my body and fully healed so I could really be here. Like, I could move all of my muscles, I could feel all of my senses, I could control all of my faculties. But I had to learn that there are a lot of people that are insensate, that they don't really feel what's going on in their tummy. They're not like, oh, my tummy is hurting me. What did I eat? Why is this happening? Or whatever. They're not aware. They're not really connected to, and they don't want to be connected to. That there's this sense of, like, people that drink alcohol, they're saying, I want to be anesthetized. I don't want to be connected to other minds. I don't want to be connected to this place. I don't want to feel things. I want to have to deal with that. I'm going to drink this anesthetization liquid that makes it so I don't have to feel all this stuff, so I don't have to feel my life. I literally had to learn that there are a lot of people here that are doing that, because that's not my approach at all, because I literally consider it to be such a wonderful opportunity to be here in a body and have arms and legs, be able to speak and be able to do all these things. And yeah, there are many peripheral timelines where I'm not able to effectively speak with my mouth or effectively move my arms and legs or do all the things that I do. So I appreciate greatly being able to walk around the neighborhood, being able to cook my eggs for breakfast and eat it. And I'm not ambivalent about that, but I had to learn that there are some people that are ambivalent about it. They don't even want to be here. They don't want to have a body. And that's pretty huge, because we have an opportunity and a gift in being here. But it's not supposed to be torturous. It's not supposed to be where you have constant invaders trying to impact your attention. where it's difficult or painful to be in the body. And it's not supposed to be a horrible, choreful, drudge, like a grim death march to the membrane of death. It's not supposed to be like that. It's supposed to be a wonderful joy. And Patricia says, yes, but it is like that. This is the whole point. We are writing a new story. We are writing a new story and having a new approach. So I agree. Like, something, guys, if I just lay it out very, honestly, like, I don't usually, blah, 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 share a lot of personal things here in these recordings. Sometimes it can be very grueling. Sometimes I feel tired. Like today, I felt very tired. I've been very exhausted by all of this political stuff that is going on, that I put my attention on the political stuff. And I'm always saying, like, when is this thing going to happen? And then it doesn't happen. And so I've redirected, and I'm like, something, that is a drain for me to put all of my attention, or any amount of my attention, on something, expecting that to transform my inner reality. I'm going to transform my inner reality because I am God. Just like everybody has that realization. I want everybody to realize that we are all God. And when you have that realization, every cell in your body has that realization along with you, and all the microbes in your tummy, and all of the matter that you are using as sustenance for your body transforms and recognizes that I am God, and we all go on this journey to a new expanded experience together. So that person that was denigrating me and saying, oh, poor Aurora, you want to transform but still stay here on this corrupt planet, it's like, when we have that collective realization, this is no longer a corrupt planet, and it was never intended to be a corrupt planet. So the transformation is not that we want some external savior to arrive, or some political solution or expediency, or some, external thing. Like, that thing has to happen, and then we finally get to be free. Although I do hear a lot of people crying out for freedom. The freedom is that internal leap from one level of consciousness to the next level of consciousness. And the way we do that is by transforming the behavior of our DNA. That's it. Now, a lot of things affect our DNA. Your food affects your DNA, electromagnetic fields, other people's thoughts, the planet herself. So many different things affect your DNA, but I will tell you that your mental paintbrush is more powerful than any of these other things. So it's not like you have to say, like, oh, I'd love to transform my DNA, but I'm not allowed to because the planet is screwed up, or because that guy over there is screwed up, or because I don't have enough money, or because I don't have this or that. That none of those excuses work, because this is all on you. And that's a big burden of responsibility on each one of us. And it's just like running the marathon. So running the marathon can be very difficult. It can be very grueling. That's part of what makes it so valuable, and what makes all of us so heroic. I'm right now giving all of us like big giant hero stickers on our lapel over here. We are all incredibly heroic for being here, and for doing this work, and for transforming on a profound consciousness and genetic level in order to go into a higher mental state. And okay, and I'll get to your questions, and then we'll stop level 1. I'll go to level 2. The higher mental state, that is what I experience when I do Flying Rainbow Lasagna. So a lot of these things that are very difficult and grueling in life, I got to do the dishes, I got to clean the house, I got to go to the grocery store, I got to pay my bills, I got to do all these things. That stuff is very difficult and hard to maintain. But I'm telling you, the Flying Rainbow Lasagna, that is the easiest part of my day, even though it's literally a magical impossibility and a thing that people would think, like, isn't that hard to do? No, it's actually very, very easy to do. I put on some kick-ass music on my headphones. I, get myself into an excited state, like the little electron. And then it's like existing in a world between worlds. That in that moment that I'm dancing like a Flying Rainbow Lasagna, my DNA is doing a new dance. We're rearranging reality. And it's in those moments of possibility when anything can happen. But that's actually a really easy and wonderful mental state for me to maintain. And I encourage everyone to do it. Think of Flying Rainbow Lasagna as like the vacation. You get to have a mini vacation in your day for 10, 15 minutes, an hour, like however long you can do it. Do the Flying Rainbow Lasagna, and then you reintegrate with reality. So you do the dance, transform reality, transform your DNA, shake up the dice, make all sorts of new possibilities and variables, and then step back into reality and see what's happening. And at a certain point, we will all be doing the Flying Rainbow Lasagna 100% of the time. We will have a constant turnover of new things always happening. So it's like the marathon gets easier, but also we never stop running the marathon. That's the whole point. You don't die. You don't hit the membrane of death. You don't stop. It's not like, oh, I can't wait until one day I'll be dead and then I'll get to rest. Like, no, you never rest, but the journey becomes easier. And so I definitely can give encouragement, because it is very difficult and very grueling sometimes. I didn't want to miss any of these comments. Someone was saying good stuff over here. Okay. All right. Pearl says, like the monks, I forget where that transform their bodies into light bodies. I think it's been documented hundreds of times. Right on, Pearl. That, I can mention this again. So there's a book that I went to a monastery and I went to their bookstore and it literally jumped off the shelf at me. It was called Rainbow Painting. And I think it's on the Amazon bookstore and you can put that in and find it. And it's apocryphal stories and some, ancient stories and some modern stories of people that have transformed into what is known as their rainbow bodies. And most of these were practitioners from the Far East in Buddhism. They use that tradition in order to do it. And it is a transformation from the physical level of density into a less dense body. And so some of these beings make the transition 100% and they don't leave any artifacts or relics behind. Some of them leave behind a relic like their hair or their fingernails or something like that. And some of them leave behind a very shrunken, condensed version, small mummified version of their physical form. And this is the idea of ascension, of transforming from a physical being into a being that is made out of pure light. Like we are light that is solidified and it's material and it's made of matter and it's slow and we can add more energy to it until it's fast, and then it's light. That's what that leap is from one level of excitation in the electron shell to the next level of excitation. We're adding energy, getting super, super, super excited and then make that jump. And then we exist in a form that would be defined as light or pure consciousness or organizing principle. If you could say intelligence is the organizing principle that makes this music as opposed to mere noise. We become expert musicians submerged in the symphony of life with no friction, with no distinction between ourselves and the great composer, the great conductor. We are the musicians and we're all playing the notes perfectly. That's what happens when we get to that level and we never stop playing. It's not like, I can't wait until I die and then I finally get a break and I finally get to go to heaven. It's like, no, that is heaven. It is continued life. It is an incredibly energetic experience and you never, never stop. Okay. All right. Joel says, the true creator, unconditional love, would not have us abandon this world. It accepts and transforms all. I agree. And Joel also says unconditional love wouldn't have us abandon our bodies either. I completely agree. So really, really good points on that. So also your cells are alive and your cells are on this journey and each one of them has its own little chakra system and its own little energy field. You're like my yellow sculpture. Each cell has its own little set of possibilities and probabilities around it. Each cell has its capacity to go from being askew to being an eternal being, and each cell wants to maintain and be alive. So it's not like, that's when I said the invader. That's the idea. An invader consciousness came to this planet and is like, I don't really belong here. I'm just using my human body for a certain amount of time and then I'm going to drop it. And that attitude has allowed for a huge amount of exploitation. Like people using their bodies, people using other people's bodies, people using animals' bodies, people using plant bodies, people using the planet like a disposable planet. None of that is okay. When you really are invested in your body, I am now really invested in my body. I'm not just some stellar, visitor that's owned like a flitty butterfly. Like I'm just flitting here for a moment and then I'll flit somewhere else. That's not what I am. It's actually like I moved in with my possessions, with my furniture. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. So all of these cells, I identify with them as me. I'm not like, I'm just driving around someone else's body. I'm just using it for a little while. No, that would be the ultimate in exploitation. I'm actually like, wow, these are my cells. I have to take care of every single one of my cells. And that also is why it's allowed and it's good for me to do my dance with my cells. I'm dancing with my cells. And I recognize that I'm affecting other people around me. But it wouldn't be right. Like this whole idea of like some otherworldly consciousness is going to channel through you or make your mouth move or make your pen write or make you paint on a painting or something like that. That's exploitation. Like if they want a body to do stuff, get a body. This is what I say to everyone. If extraterrestrial beings, non-embodied beings come up to you and they're like, I'm a sacred being. I want to live in your body, or I want to come through your body, or I want to speak through you, or I want to do whatever. It's like, that's great. What happened to your body? Why don't you have a body? Why aren't you here? If you want to be here, you can vibrate like a flying rainbow lasagna and find a body and get into a body. Why aren't you doing this? Why do you want my body? So these are real serious questions about what, and the answer is because those are the musicians who smash their guitars on stage. And now they're trying to still influence the music, even though they are not good musicians. So that's the whole firewall. That's the whole fail-safe mechanism of the creator, that it's supposed to be, you're only allowed to be in the time field, circulating around on those areas of possibility and probability, playing the actual music. if you conform to certain behavior patterns. And if you divert from the music too much and you get a little bit too experimental, then you don't get to be in the band anymore. And so that's the whole idea of Flying Rainbow Lasagna. And we'll get into this with level 2 and non-duality. I'm not breaking any of the rules of music by doing this. I'm actually following all of the rules, and I'm transcending them and, you know, writing a new chapter of what can be done. So that's it. I'm using the structure. I'm not throwing the structure away. And so that's a big part of it. When we transform, when we make this ascension, when we realize I am God, when we get to the next level, you don't leave your body behind. Your body is you, your stuff, your matter. You literally have made this thing that's made out of matter, and you imbued it with intelligence and consciousness and life, and you fed it and cared for it, and, you know, put moisturizer on its face every morning. Like, that's your body. But here's the point. I realized I'm in this time and place where a lot of people don't like their bodies. They're like, oh, I don't like the shape of my earlobes. Oh, I don't like the shape of my eyebrows. I don't like this body. And it's like, whatever it is, it's the silliest thing. It's like, no, your body is a miracle and you're lucky to have it. But they're like, I don't like the shape of my earlobes. So, like, people are really crazy. They're not appreciating what they've got. And a lot of that is social and cultural programming, and a lot of that is genetic destruction, genetic distortion. But yeah, a big part of it is recognizing that we each have this amazing opportunity by having a body and being in the time field. And then the challenge, like the fight, is gaining full control of your body, so that it's not ancestors or mommy or daddy or the government or the Pope or any external deity or any channeled ascended master, quote unquote, acting through you, where it's just you. Because every single one of us should have the capacity to simply make our own choices in the quantum laboratory of our life and then see how those choices play out. It shouldn't be like, oh, I'm going to drive down this road, but something a voice in your head says you're not allowed to drive down that road, or you're not allowed to think that thought, or you're not allowed to go to that place. It's like, that is not, you're not being able to do the experiments that you need to do in order to actually learn. And that when we have that thought, I am God, we finished the term paper. We've passed the exam. It's like you did all of the right calculations to go in the right direction. You passed the audition. That's how I can say it. You passed the audition, and now you get to exist at the next highest level of consciousness. Okay. All right. Pearl says, I love it. My husband tells our kids he's not dying, and they all believe him. She says, do you think that is why Egyptians and others mummified their body but missed the point? Yes, absolutely. So the Egyptians are an outgrowth of the ancient Atlantean, antediluvian, sophisticated worldwide culture where nobody died. And when people started to die in ancient Atlantis due to the fall of consciousness and the destruction of the genetic program of humanity, what some of the technology that was created, mummification is a literal, and the spells that are used are a literal form of technology. What they did in ancient Egypt was they found a way to extend the journey of the afterlife, because if the journey of your afterlife is based on the process of decomposition of your body, and you mummify the body so that its genes, it's like instead of the genes slowing down, going to entropy and then stopping and being frozen. It's like, wait a minute, maybe that mummy still has a little tiny bit of a dance going on, even though it was mummified 3,000 years ago. And so that's the idea, that people are thinking, oh, maybe I can subvert the process of death and experience immortality and eternal life. That's the ancient Egyptians. In the ancient Egyptian blah, blah, blah culture, very quickly, they were all immortals. The gods were immortals. Osiris and Isis were immortal gods, and Set was the jealous god that killed Osiris and invented death. And then Isis gathered up all his poor body parts, bandaged them together, and used sex magic to reanimate him. So this is the whole idea that the Egyptians then based their earthly mundane culture and their earthly mundane eschatological expectations on this immortal, mythological being. And it got horribly distorted, because that, first of all, it's not the way you're supposed to do it. But second of all, it turned into this whole, industry, this whole mummification industry of, yeah, I'll sell you some spells. You want to live forever? Hey man, I'll sell you some spells. You had to have the right equipment. You had to have the right gear. Just like in this time and place, like, hey, if you want to, have a tablet, have a computer, or mine Bitcoin, like, you have to have the gear. You can't just do it. You have to have all the technology to do it. So yeah, so that's what the Egyptian book of coming forth into day. It is mistranslated as the Egyptian book of the dead. It actually says coming forth into day. And the whole idea is these are the written instructions of what you can do in order to quote unquote achieve immortality. And at first it was only for the most special people. And then eventually it became popularized. And then eventually the Egyptian book of coming into day was a papyrus that anyone could have. But it used to be like secret hidden spells. And if you do these secret hidden things, then hey man, you get an afterlife. But if you don't do the right things, then you don't get an afterlife. But I've been telling everybody like afterlife is bogus. That what you're supposed to do is not hit the membrane of death and continue up that central tent pole infinitely, knowing that you're God. So, all the things of like selling favors, selling indulgences, selling people the idea of immortality, that all became, horribly, horribly corrupt in ancient Egypt. All right, more questions, more good stuff. And then I'll go to level 2. Joel says, Yeshua said, I am that I am. We misinterpreted what that means. I think that's really truthful. I think that the original teacher, Yeshua, and what they taught about was horribly distorted and was turned into this whole story of the Roman Jesus. But yeah, I think that Yeshua was an actual living embodied person that, walked on the earth and that had that understanding that I am God and that spoke from that viewpoint and from that truth. And I think that there were many other people that also have had this experience in many different diverse cultures. But it's just like, you write about this one guy and then inflate the identity, inflate the expectation, and then twist and distort it and use it as a control system. And the whole idea of the death cult stuff has got to go out the window. So back to what Joelle said. She said, just saying I am. That's what God is. That's exactly it. Consciousness. I am. Consciousness is being God. And she's agreeing that attention is like making love. So back to Patricia was saying that it is hard work to control the mind. It is hard work to control the mind because what we have are constant, it's like dog on a leash. Like your mind wants to go in this direction, but something keeps pulling it over here, then it pulls it over here, then it pulls it over here, pulls it over here. It's a hacked operating system where the human mind is implanted and the humans don't have control of their own mind. That's intentional. That's not by accident at all. And it's the implanters of the human mind that want to be able to keep your mind on a leash. And those implanters are not divine. They want you to worship them like gods in the same way that many human owners are worshipped by their dogs. Their dogs are like, I love you humans so much. You feed me and keep me safe and you're so great. But it's like, I'm not God. I'm the person that feeds you and keeps you safe. And so these are what some of these low-level demiurge sub-deities have purported to be the divine, great composer, great, but they are not. And so the idolization, the worship, and the giving of energy and attention to those beings keeps them nourished and alive and functional on some level, but that's not real God. And that if you really connect with the true divine, then you're feeding yourself. That's what that is when you do that central core timeline and you make that realization, you realize I am God. It's an endless feedback loop. You're feeding yourself. It's a perpetual motion, frictionless, and it never ends. And that is how we have infinity. All right. Joel says meditation is a better way to decompress than alcohol. I agree. And meditation is something that we should be doing all the time, like not just when we sit for 20 minutes, but that we should be doing it throughout our day. And she also says we do need to empty the subconscious back up every now and then. And Patricia had a really good comment. She says you can't force that realization, that sense of I am God. I completely agree. We're in this refinery and it's like we're building muscles, we're doing the workout at the gym, we're doing the marathon, and you can't be like, I'm a taskmaster, I'm going to force you to do the marathon before you're ready. It's like you got to do it when you're ready. Patricia says I affirm it and that I feel less than. I'm tired of being on the roller coaster vacillating between ego self and God self. That is I'm saying this now to myself, that is the process of refinement that we're doing, that oscillation back and forth between ego self, embodied, the musician playing the music, and God self, the creator that created the potential for all of this. And that we really are in a creative collaboration with ourselves, but coming from a vastly different direction and moving at a vastly different rate. Thank you, Ben. This is a beautiful comment. I'm going to read it. Feeling so much love and gratitude right now. So excited to be here with you all. Thank you for sharing, Aurora. Thank you very much. That is like Gatorade on the marathon. It's very grueling to do this energy work. It's very grueling to be like, we're changing our consciousness. We're doing all this stuff. There's crazy fat ass politicians in Washington D.C. They're up to all sorts of hijinks. Don't pay attention to them. Do your thing. Like do what's really important. Like it's very, very grueling. It's very, very tiring. Pedro says, I used to think people were at different stages of evolution. Now I've added that people are at different stages or intensity of distraction from reality. I think that's a really excellent distinction to make. Because I think that reality, this external manifestation, is our minds. Like we are literally externalizing and solidifying the potentials that are inside of our mind. And that when we become virtuosos when we've cultivated what's inside of our mind, then we can transform the outer realm. So I keep on working on transforming the outer realm by transforming the inner. Like I keep on singing, I'm going to sing a better song and then everything's going to be better. Like that is my way of doing things. So that is my whole approach. Yeah, let me just see. I think there were a few more comments. Very good. Let me just wrap up level 1 for right now. So that whole idea of vibrating membranes to bring together formerly discrete realms, that's combining the inside and the outside. When you flying rainbow lasagna with your DNA, you are transforming your inner realm to being communicative with your outer realm. That's what this dance does. And don't worry, I haven't gone through all of the steps of how your DNA is transformed by this. We'll do more in the future, because I'm jumping ahead a little bit in class. This is technically lesson 11, but I'm showing it now because all these things I say, I do it in response to what we need in real time. Okay, I have watched The Meaning of Life by Monty Python. Those are very funny movies. Yeah, inner and outer now become communicative. So that means when you meet people in the outer realm, outer world, you meet another person at the supermarket, you're actually meeting yourself. When you are eating food, you're actually eating yourself. When you are looking at things that you don't approve of, you're actually looking at, like, what is that doing in my dream? I'm the dreamer. I don't think I want to have that thing there. You need to dream up a solution. So this is part of it. I'm going to get into level 2, duality and non-duality with this shape. So let me just, because if I do too much, the upload is too much. So let me just say thank you to everyone who gave great insights, shared their ideas. Thank you to everyone who watched this video, and tune in for level 2. We're not going anywhere, okay? So I'm just ending the recording for right now.